Bright City fam, yo, welcome back, man. I'm so glad you guys are here. Hey, and if this is your first time checking us out, I just want to say welcome. My name's Rick, and I'm the pastor here at Bright City. And hey, man, right now we're starting a brand new series, and I'm going to tell you the title of it here in a little bit because the title of it actually has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about tonight. And so I'm not going to tell you what it is until a little bit later. Is that cool? I hope that's cool. But one of the things we believe here at Bright City, this is our vision statement here at Bright City, that we believe the future is bright. And then one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about in general, is that they wish they knew their calling. Have you ever asked that? I know I've asked that to myself before, like, God, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Or what's the meaning of all of this, right? That might be how you've asked it. But what is my purpose in life? And so I think most of the time when we talk about this, we're talking about what's the skill set that we have, what's something that I'm good at, like, am I a good singer, am I a good painter, am I good at math, am I a scientist, am I gonna be when I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, man. I love dinosaurs. They freak me out, and I think that's awesome. And so I've always wanted to be a paleontologist when I was a kid, and that's something that I aspired to be, but as I got older, I realized you do a lot of school, and I wasn't the brightest crayon in the box, and so it didn't quite work out for me. So begin that question of what am I here for? What's my gift? What's my skill set? And I think when we ask that question, what is my purpose? That's really what we mean. But tonight, I really don't want us to focus on the tangible, practical part of it or tactile part of it of what do I do Monday through Friday for a job? I want us to focus more on this idea of purpose, more than skill set. What is your purpose? Have you ever asked that? What's the meaning of all this? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Is it to make more money? Not a bad thing, right? Or maybe it's to be successful. Or maybe it's to get married and to raise a family, right? That's a big deal for you. Or maybe your thought is my purpose in life is I want to do more good deeds than bad things. That way I go to somewhere better than bad in the end of all of this, right? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And I think all of us have asked this question before. What is my purpose? But today, I just want us to approach this question from a little bit of a different angle. I want us to make a small question I want us to make a small change in that question that I think can make a huge impact on our lives. And not just our lives, but the people around us. I believe it can make a huge impact in your partner's life, in your family's life, in your friend's life, coworkers, your neighbors, your classmates. I think this small shift in the question can make a massive impact. Instead of asking, what is, ask, what if, right? There's a little bit more hope in that, right? It's a little more brighter of a question, what is my purpose? But what if my purpose was? And what if your purpose was super simple? What if your purpose was to do this? Illuminate. Now, you're oh, that's a huge word, right? I understand, I completely understand. We're gonna pack it a little bit. But as a follower of Jesus, right? As we look at the life of Jesus and we say we believe in him, that he was perfect, that he was the Son of God, that he came here to live a perfect life that I couldn't live, and he died on a cross because someone had to pay for all my mess ups, and he paid for it by dying on the cross, and we believe that he really did raise 3 days later to prove that he had power over death, hell, and the grave, and that we said in our lives at one point or another, God, I want to make you Lord of my life. And that we confessed our sins, we repented of those things, and that we follow Jesus. And so for us as followers of Jesus, that is our purpose. Super simple. Illuminate. That's it. Every single one of us, illuminate. That's the purpose God has given you in this life. You got one job to do. You got one thing to do. Illuminate. And so I want us to couple this idea, illuminate, with a verse. Matthew 5:16, I'm sure you've heard this before. Let your light shine before others, that they will see your good deeds and give praise to your Father in heaven. That one of the ways that we let our light shine, one of the ways you illuminate, and this is what I want us to start these series of talks about, focusing in on this very first week. And I think it might take some of y'all back a little bit, be taken aback, I believe is the right way to say it, about what we're gonna talk about first in this idea, illuminate, to let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and that they would give praise to God in heaven. One of the ways that we do this and the way that we're gonna talk about this tonight is simply, y'all ready? By talking about Jesus, by sharing our faith, right? Now, I know. Some of us, when we start to think about sharing our faith, many of us start to think about, maybe you get freaked out a little bit, or maybe you think about a preacher you saw on TV one time, or like Billy Graham, or an evangelist type of guy, and he's dressed up in this suit, and he's got this tie on, and he has this massive crowd. And I think what happens when we begin to think that way is we start to believe that like sharing our faith or whatever is done by guys who aren't afraid of public speaking or something. Like, they're done by Bible-believing, broad-shouldered, big-voiced evangelists, and it's not a job for little old me, right? I think that that's sometimes what we begin to think. But what if that was your job? What if that was your purpose? What if your purpose was to be an evangelist? What if your purpose was to share your faith? Bro, I know that could probably freak you out a little bit, right? Early on in my faith, when I would think about that and I'd hear preachers talk about it, I'd get super uncomfortable, right? Because we're scared to share. And so that question, going from what is my purpose to what if my purpose was just to share my faith? That's how I illuminate, right? That's how I shine a light before others, right? And so I want us to ask another question, and I want you to be aware of the feelings that come up when I ask this question, okay? So take note, maybe of that physical reaction you have, the honest reaction you have, because this question's only gonna work if you're honest. You gotta be transparent, okay? You ready? You ready for the question? When's the last time, you probably know what I'm gonna say, you shared your faith? Yeah, I could end right there, like mic drop, walk away, and we could be like, yeah, felt a little guilty, right? That might have been your feeling. What are the feelings that came up? What are your thoughts when you hear that question? When was the last time you shared your faith? Is it a feeling of guilt, maybe? Maybe for some of us, it's a feeling of like condemnation or something like that. Or maybe for you, it's joy. Like you've recently shared your faith and you're like, yeah, I finally don't feel guilty about that question. Maybe for you, you have this sense of fear, right? Like being afraid of sharing your faith, like scared to share, right? And that's okay. Just being honest with it is the very first step. And I think what happens when we ask or we think about sharing our faith is we want to protect ourselves, or maybe you want to protect your kiddos. So like, let me unpack this a little bit. So early on in my faith, it was very typical for me to quit listening, when I came to faith in Jesus, to quit listening to certain types of music or to quit hanging out with certain types of friends because they would be a bad influence on my life, right? That I wanted to step away from the darkness so that I could learn to walk in newness of life, right? And I think what happens, and maybe you were raised that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think what becomes a byproduct is that we start to protect ourselves. Or maybe you see it in the way that you protect your kiddos, and that you don't want them to be easily influenced by the world. And so we guard our lives from darkness, and we pull ourselves away from the world, and we stop watching certain movies, or we stop listening to certain types of music, or stop hanging out with certain types of people, right? And these are all, hear me out, these are all great things to be mindful of. But if we're not careful, the byproduct can be that we've built this little Christian bubble all around us. And then all of our friends, we start to notice, oh, they're all Christians. And so we're all surrounded by others who have seen the light of Jesus, right? And we've walked out of the darkness and we've stepped into his glorious light. This is a great thing, man. This is fantastic. It's what you're supposed to do. But this is part of what Jesus means when he tells his followers to go make disciples, right? This idea, maybe you've heard the word discipleship, is that some point Jesus says in his Great Commission, this idea of his Great Commission is not by telling the disciples to go and huddle up and to create their own little bubble of believers, right? Instead, he starts his Great Commission by telling us to go. To get on out of here, right? Because what good is light if it's never in the darkness? And what good is a lamp, Jesus says, at night if it's hidden, right? What good is light if it's never in the darkness? And Jesus said that. He says that no one lights a lamp and then hides it or puts it under a basket. But instead you put your lamp on a stand where people can see the light. That's the whole reason for us walking in the light. That was the whole reason Jesus showed up, was to bring light into our darkness. And if we're transparent, we all have that response when we think about when was the last time you shared your faith, that response of like guilt or condemnation, fear, maybe mixed with a little bit of joy, the times that we actually did share our faith. Okay, so this question can kind of sting a little bit, to be honest. And instead of that, I want us to begin today by changing this question of when was the last time I shared my faith to this wonder of what if, right? What if I shared my faith? I think when we ask, when was the last time you've done it? It's like my parents asking me when I was a kid, Rick, when was the last time you cleaned your room? It meant like, because it smells funky up in here, right? Instead of saying, when was the last time you shared your faith? What if you shared your faith? For real, think about that, man. What would happen if I shared my faith? What would happen to my faith if I shared my faith? Maybe it's been a minute, right? So like, since you've thought about this, and so here's the great thing. You're not alone in that thinking. Like, I haven't thought about this in a long time. A recent study showed that 95% of us that call ourselves followers of Jesus have actually never even shared our faith. That's pretty crazy, right? But that this is crazy, it also makes me curious about what if I shared my faith? What if we shared our faith? For real, man. How different would our community look if we accepted that our purpose in life is simple, illuminate? And one of the ways we do that is by sharing our faith. Super simple. Now this word, illuminate, you might be freaking out right now, right? Thinking like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Well, guess what? You're in good company because 95% of us have never shared our faith, right? And man, also, the Apostle Paul freaked out a little bit when it came to sharing his faith. And you're like, whoa, Rick, wait, what? Here's the thing. His freak out wasn't because he was afraid to share. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't share. In Acts chapter 17, verse 6, it says that Paul was deeply troubled. He was freaking out, man, by all the idols that he began to see in his city. In the beautiful, incredible revival that occurs in the book of Acts. You know, the word revival is a huge deal for us this year, right? This beautiful revival that occurs in Acts is all propelled when people discover their purpose is simply to illuminate. That their purpose was to proclaim. That's it. And so this question, why should I share my faith? And there's this great quote by Martin Luther, right? So why should I share my faith? Because it's like, if God can do anything and if he's sovereign or in control of everything, then he'll save who he wants to save. And like, why do I need to be a part of that, right? And Martin Luther says this, that God does not need our good works, but our neighbor does. So moving on, we have these 3 family values here at Bright City. Number 1 is transparent, 2, expectant, 3, obedient. Now we use these 3 words to guide everything we do in life, everything, including how we answer this question of why should I share my faith? What does it look like? And so I want us to walk through those 3 words of our family values here at Bright City: transparent, expectant, obedient. And I want us to apply those 3 values to the question of, what if I shared my faith? Why should I share my faith? What would my faith look like if I shared my faith? And so this first value, transparent, it means simply this: I need Jesus. That you are transparent. We can be transparent about asking this question when we go to the first time that we ever asked this question. Remember when you were broken, right? For you to be transparent is to remember that moment in your life that you needed Jesus. And you gotta remember the darkness Jesus took you out of, that you were broken, that you came to a place in your life where you realized you needed Jesus. That the first step in learning to sharing your faith is by just being transparent. I was at a point in my life where I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And I saw my brokenness, and I was finally transparent with my brokenness. And in my brokenness, I saw that I needed Jesus. And I think sometimes we easily forget that we used to be walking around in darkness. And so we have to remember, first of all, to be transparent, that we were broken, that we were walking in darkness. So this word transparent, there's a verse that we use to remember this, and it's in Ephesians 5:14. It says, "For the light makes everything visible." And that's why it said, "Awake, O sleeper, rise up from the dead, and Christ will give you light." It's this idea that I was dead, that I was asleep, that I was walking in darkness, that we have to begin by being transparent, and that it was Jesus that we needed, right? Transparent. Why should I share my faith? Because, man, I needed Jesus too. And to be transparent, the more I walk through life, the more I realize I still need Jesus every single day. How do I share my faith? What does it look like to share my faith? Why should I share my faith? Because if we're all transparent, man, we all need Jesus. That's our first word, transparent, in our family values here at Bright City. Number two, this word expectant, right? This word expectant, it means that I trust Jesus to show off. When you're expectant, when you share your faith, so this is what it looks like. You are expectant when you share your faith because you expect God to show off when you share. That your faith is expectant on God to show up. And so you share your faith, right? This is what it looks like to be expectant. The verse that we couple with this is Isaiah 42:16. This is what Jesus says. He says that I will lead the blind in a way that they do not know. In paths that they have not known, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness before them into light. In rough places, I will make into level ground. And these are the things I do, and I don't forsake them. Being expectant. Why do we share our faith? It's because we expect God to lead when we share. We expect God to guide our words when we share. We expect God to turn their darkness into light, just like He did ours. Why do we share our faith? Because we expect God to show off, man. We trust Jesus when He says that these are the things that I do, and ain't nobody gonna stop me, right? Like Jesus is super confident in His ability. He says in John 12:46, He says that I've come like light to shine in a dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark. Expectant. Why should I share my faith? Because we trust that God's gonna show off. We trust that God will do what He says He will do. First of all, we're transparent. We realize we need Jesus. Second, why do we share our faith? Because we're expectant, man, in our faith. I expect God to show up in conversations now. Man, when things happen, when I'm talking with people about what I believe in my faith and who Jesus is, that I expect God to show up in that conversation. And when things happen that seem crazy, I don't put that as being like happenstance or just like, man, that's crazy that just kind of happened, right? No, I'm expecting God to show up in a conversation, and I'm expecting Him to show off in that conversation. And for me and the person I'm talking with about Jesus, for both of us to be like, whoa, this is crazy, right? Like, and that right there is God speaking. And that's how I'll use that as a way to tell people about who God is. That we have to be transparent, that we need Jesus, but we also have to be expectant for Him to show off in the middle of our conversation. So third, this last core value, this last family value at Bright City is real simple, obedient. That means that I follow Jesus. Real simple. You are obedient to share your faith because you follow Jesus. The verse we use to remember this word obedient, is John 8:12. He says that I am the light of the world, and that if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. That's why we follow Jesus. Why do we share our faith? Because we're obedient. We know what it looks like to follow Jesus, that when we follow Jesus, that we won't walk in darkness, right? This idea of Matthew 5:16 and illuminate. Let your light shine before others so that they would see your good deeds, your good works, the things you do, and that they would give praise to your Father in heaven. We do this, we illuminate, we share our faith, man, in three simple ways of being transparent. Remembering I need Jesus. Being expectant, which means I trust Jesus to show up and to show off. And so I'm gonna share my faith, obedient, that I follow Jesus. Why? Because our job, our purpose, what is my purpose, is simple. Illuminate. That is our task. That's our job description, man. That's why we call it Bright City, is to remind us of our job is simple. Illuminate. That's it. That's all we do. And you might be thinking, Rick, bro, this sounds awesome, man. But to be honest, to be transparent with you, I'm a little freaked out to share my faith. I'm a little scared to share. And man, I get that, it's still tough for me to do right now. And before we leave tonight, I just want to leave you with this story. It's about this man named John Wilbur Chapman. And John was a believer, but he was kind of stuck in this moment of his life in his faith where God was calling him to share his faith. And one day he's at college, right? And he attended this revival service. And it's at this same time that John was still stuck in whether or not to being willing to obey God and what God was calling him to do. And so he's being transparent, right? Like, I'm stuck and I know God's calling me and I know that I need Jesus, but he was stuck at being expectant and obedient for God to show up, right? He was wondering, am I willing to obey God? Will God show up if I obey? And so John's sitting in this service, this revival service, right? And he's in college, he's sitting in the service, wrestling with the Lord on being willing to do what God called him to do, being willing to be obedient. And the man preaching said something that totally changed the course of John's life. The preacher said, if you're not willing to be used by God, which is something that all of us struggle with, right? Has there ever been a moment in your life that you're not willing to be used by God, where you're like, I know God's calling me to do this. I know God's calling me to share my faith, but I'm really not willing to do that, right? So check this out. This preacher says, if you're not willing to be used by God, simply ask God to make you willing to be willing. John heard this, and it was then that he began to ask the Lord. He was transparent. He said, Lord, I am not willing, but he was expectant. But I am willing to be made, because these are the things God does, so he could be obedient. I am willing to be made willing. I am not willing, but I am willing to be made willing. John went on to share his faith with hundreds of people. God used him even though he admitted to being unwilling. And that's why I want us to focus on that question. What if? The wonder of what if, man. What if we shared our faith? And sharing your faith might still freak you out. But what if you prayed, Lord, I am not willing, but I am willing to be made willing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.